Morning. Thanks for coming in today. I know you all are busy, so appreciate the time to come in for DOT training. Just a couple of things. Before you leave, if you could turn in the orange piece of paper on top there, just on the back, if you could sign and date it. And you can leave that at the table if you want. Make sure you sign the sign-in sheet. And then Barb is going around and verifying your driver's license / CDL. So if you can see Barb, if she hasn't seen you before you leave, that'd be great. Otherwise, thanks for coming in, and Joe will go ahead and get started.
Thank you. All right, good morning, everybody. Everybody's favorite training, don't do drugs. But before we get into the DOT regulations and what we're here for today, I'm just going to do a little overview of your employee assistant program, what it is, how to utilize it, how valuable it is. So an employee assistant program is a confidential employee resource. If work is affecting home, if home is affecting work, if you have any adversity, any challenge, any stressor in your life that you need some support, some resources, someone to talk to, then you can call up your EAP. Not only for you as employees, but for your dependents also. So if you have any children, a dependent is any family member that lives in your home that you're responsible for. Like back in the day, we used to have a dependent that is, prove they're a dependent, claim them on your taxes. But with the diversity of our homes, the diversity of our families, a dependent is any family member that lives in your home that you're responsible for. They have the same benefits through the EAP that you do. The first benefit is I think it's 5, it might be 6. Sorry, I didn't check the contract. Let's say 6 face-to-face, totally free face-to-face counseling sessions. That's 6 for you per year, 6 for each of your dependents in your home. Let's say you have some family member, a dependent that doesn't live in the vicinity. Maybe they're out of the States, they live in California, Florida. Maybe they have some, maybe if they're going to college, they have some study pressures and school pressures, maybe dating stressors, maybe drugs and alcohol problem, they need to get some help with, any type of stress that they have. They can call up, tell us where their parent works and who they are, and then we can find an affiliate closest to where they reside, so they get 6 free face-to-face counseling sessions. Now, these aren't deep psychotherapy sessions. Oh, besides the face-to-face, you can have the choice of virtual. So you can have face-to-face in person or virtual, whichever most convenient for you. Now, this isn't deep psychotherapy, so they're not going to get into, did you love your mother and stuff like that. This is just problem-solving sessions. What is the challenge, and how can we get you beyond that challenge? What do we need to get you back on track? It's very convenient to use. You make the call, you call us, make the call on your day, on your time. They have some evening hours if you need evening hours, so it's very convenient to use. Like I said, the 50,000 affiliates, our main building is in Fraser in Macomb County. It took me 55 minutes to get here, so obviously that would be out of your way. So you would just call the number and just tell us your zip code, and we'll find an affiliate closest to where you reside. Some people just need to identify resources so they can use that toll-free number, and they can call just to get some resources on whatever your challenge is, whether it's marital or parental or relational or any type of stress, financial, taking care of an aging loved one, anything going on in your life. We can direct you to the website, which I'll go over in a minute, or just direct you to any type of resources that may be available to you. It's a voluntary service. Your employer paid for it 100%, totally upfront. They pay a one-time annual fee to provide these benefits for their employees as well as their dependents. So use it if you want, don't use it if you don't want. It doesn't matter, it's totally paid for. And I really want to stress the confidentiality. It is totally confidential. You go through us, you don't go through your employer. Your employer has no idea who's calling, what they're calling for, so it is totally confidential. It's so confidential that we take care of all the scheduling, even the affiliates. So if a Canton Township employee makes an appointment at a certain location, and another Canton Township is going to make an appointment at that same location, Hopefully we don't schedule on the same day, but if that's the only convenient time for you, we always bank like 2 hours before that appointment and 2 hours after that appointment, so you'll never cross paths with any of your colleagues. So we know where you're at. And I know there's some cultural barriers, there's some generational barriers of somebody reaching out for help, and I just really want to, reassure you that it is confidential, and the faster you get some help, get some resources, the easier it is to get beyond that challenge. After the 6 free sessions, if you do need continued support, we would find out what type of insurance you have. If you have mental health coverage on your insurance, we'll find a counselor who takes that insurance, and then we would refer you out to them for continued support on whatever that fee-based service is with your health benefits through Canton. So besides the face-to-face sessions, we also have the 24-hour, 7-day-a-week phone access. So during office hours, it goes to our call center. Tell us what your needs are. We can direct you to any resources. If there's a counselor available, you can talk directly to the counselor. But after office hours, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, weekend, holiday, you call that number. It does go through a call center just to filter out some things that aren't needed for talking to a counselor. It used to be the counselor took that phone home, which they do. They're on call. But some people would call at 3 o'clock in the morning just to cancel an appointment for tomorrow. And that wasn't a good use of the counselor's time. So it does go through a filter call center, and that counselor will call you right back. So like I mentioned earlier, why would somebody use the EAP? And on the screen here, you can see some of those challenges, some of that adversity, some of those stressors that somebody might reach out to use their EAP. I teach a class called Mental Health First Aid, and this is how to identify early stages of mental health challenges or mental health disorders in youth and in adults. And the reason I'm telling you this is because there is a really interesting statistic that I like sharing. From the beginning or from the onset of a mental health challenge to when somebody goes and gets some support, how much time do you think passes from the onset of a mental health challenge or stressor to when somebody reaches out for help? Anybody want to bark out a time? How much time lapse? Any guesses out there? We had a few months, and then was that a year? A year? The median amount of time, the middle, is 10 years before somebody reaches out to get some support and some help. Yeah, half earlier, half later, but the median amount of time is 10 years. I mean, that's a lot. Think about somebody who has maybe a bum knee, and they deal with that bum knee for 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, and then they finally get it replaced, and then they're like, wow, man, I should have did that 5 years ago. Same thing with any mental health challenge or stressor. The earlier you identify it, the earlier you reach out for some assistance, the faster and easier it is to recover from that and get what you need. So this is our website here. Now, this isn't your EAP. If you go to CARE's worklifesolutions.com, which is on any CARE document that you see, and it's that'll take you to, my laser doesn't reach way up there. That'll take you to careofsem.com programs up there. Same company, same website. CARE Southeastern Michigan is a nonprofit drug prevention mental health agency. We've been around for over 40 years. And part of our agency, we have the Employee Assistant Program. So there's lots of programs for Macomb County residents, but anybody from any other county can come into Macomb County to use our services, like parenting classes. We have adolescent anger management. We have Teen Intervene for if your teenager started experimenting with drugs or alcohol. We have classes for that. We have peer recovery coaches. If a loved one needs connection to treatment, or somebody coming out of treatment, to hook up with a peer recovery coach to help them maintain and be successful in their recovery. So that's open to anybody, but your EAP is the top right-hand bubble there. It says EAP login, that top white bubble in the right-hand corner. That is your EAP. You click on that EAP, brings you to a password page. And I didn't look up your password either. Canton DWP dash WLS. I'm taking a guess at that. But if you see any of the CARE documents anywhere in your workplace, you can ask your supervisor, you can ask HR for a trifold pamphlet of CARE information, and your password will be on the inside of that. So you can get your password on any CARE document that you see in the workplace. You type in the password. Now you're into our EAP website. You see major topics, parenting, any parenting-related struggles, not even struggles, it's just parent education, developmental stages, discipline, healthy relationships, communication, things about education, so anything that has to do with parenting. Aging is our aging selves, our aging loved ones, things start changing, how to stay healthy and be interested in learning those aging challenges. Balancing, whenever you click on one of these major topics, subtopics come up. Like here's a screenshot of balancing. We have personal growth and families and grief and loss and addiction and recovery relationships. The next one, thriving. Thriving is anything that has to do with our health. So men's health, women's health, children's health, eating healthy, and all that. Anything that has to do with our health. Working, I'll click on that one again, and you can see career development, transitions, diversity, safety, development, productivity, so anything related to working. Living has to do with living, like mortgages and finances and things like that, anything that has to do with our living. And then international, if you're working abroad or having family members come into the country or you're going out of the country, all of that red tape. So really valuable information if you're into that self-help, self-improvement, getting resources. If you don't see what you're looking for in the subtopics, there's a search bar in the top right-hand corner. Just put your search word in there, and next thing you click on with either the search word or the subtopics brings up all the articles on that topic, any online seminars related to that topic, resources related to that topic, and then you just click and read, click and watch, click and listen to any of those resources there. Something really interesting I like, it's under the Living tab. You see the path and that arrow's pointing to, homepage, Living Legal Forms. I've used this probably 3 times in my life since I've been associated with CARE. My mother passed a few years back. I went on here and got a renter's agreement. We rented out her house. So you can see some of the categories of after death certificates and bills of sale, borrowing and lending money, transfer of property. So any legal thing that you're doing, you can skip maybe a lawyer and get one of these documents here. These are downloadable. You can edit them, get rid of the sentence you don't like, add the sentence you do like. So it saves you some time and gives you some resources. We also have online seminars. Each month we feature a topic. You can watch the seminar. It's an hour long, so they're kind of involved, but it's any specific topic that you want to improve on. Assessments, there's probably maybe a dozen health and wellness assessments on this site. Stress assessment, diabetes assessment, alcohol assessment, those kind of things. Then we have these centers here, Savings Center. The holidays are coming up. If you're into that saving money, online shopping, register for a savings center. Once you click that, a box pops up, and you put your username, put a username and a password. Not the one you use to get into the system, because you're already in the system. You're just registering for a savings center. 25% discounts on anything you buy right off the rip. 25% discounts, free shipping and handling. So name brand items, everyday items, luxury items, if you're buying something. My girlfriend is that online shopper with the Prime Amazon card, and she says, you want to buy anything, tell me, I'll get it for the cheapest. So she bought one of those $400 blenders, the Ninjas or the Vitamix or something. So just for a goof, I went on here, And I found that blender for $50 less than what she paid for with all of her research and stuff, so had to rub that in a little bit. Relocation, if you're relocating, it just gives you all the resources. Put your zip code in there, give you all the resources of where you're located, where you want to move to. Locate providers. Put your zip code in there, pet care, child care, elder care, whatever you're looking for. We already talked about assessments. And then there's GoodRx discounts. Tax season's not too far away. There's free tax software on this site. So there's a lot of great resources on this site. If just visit the site, do some surfing around, and see, if it's valuable to you. On the very top, there's newsletters. We always feature a newsletter. We feature Supervisor Wire quarterly, and you see this topic, leadership's part in mental health and wellness. There's also an employee monthly newsletter where it's just focuses on a specific topic. Could be like family, it could be work, it could be relationships, it could be health and things like that. So in summary, you get the 6 free face-to-face counseling sessions, you have the 24-hour, 7-day-a-week phone access, and you have a self-serve website for any type of resources. All right, so now let's get into what we're here for. Drug-free workplace. That's Scott. My name is Joe Galino, but that's Scott Newcomb. He's our senior clinician, so he is the SAP counselor. SAP stands for Substance Abuse Professional. So if you violate any of the DOT guidelines and you go to an assessment, you'll go to a SAP counselor that specializes in addiction. So why are we here? What is it all about? And back in 1987, Chase, Maryland, there was an Amtrak train collision. Forgot how many died, probably, maybe a dozen or less than a dozen died, many injured. But the 2 engineers operating the train were tested positive for marijuana. So that was in 87. One of them died, the other one went to prison for 4 years for for that incident. So 4 years later, finally Congress passed the 1991 Omnibus Bus Transportation Act. And this act requires all employers who have employees who do safety-sensitive jobs to provide this substance abuse testing and substance abuse training programs for their employees. And that's what we're doing here today. I want to show you this video because we're wondering, here it is, 21st century, 2022, do people still come to work under the influence of drugs or alcohol? Don't you think that we'd be responsible enough not to do that anymore? And it happens more often than you see. We see some of it on the news, but a lot of it doesn't make the news, but it happens more often than we think in the workplace. So let's watch a little video here for something that happened in New York.
Scared for their lives when their drunk school bus driver took them on a terrifying ride. CBS News national correspondent Jeff Glor has the rest of the story. Good morning, Jeff.
Harry, good morning to you. This ride took place last May, but the driver was just sentenced on Tuesday, and the evidence against her was pretty clear.
Turn the bus on! No! You're backing into the freaking ditch! You're making the little kids die! No!
The frightening scene played out in Alfred, New York, as dozens of children on that bus pleaded with their intoxicated driver.
You're not okay, and I know it. Just turn it off, please. No!
The driver, with a blood alcohol level of 0.15, sped down roads, ran over a mailbox, and would not stop.
Stop, you gotta stop.
The ordeal ended when the children rescued themselves by exiting the rear of the bus after the driver refused to let them off.
You can't get off the bus!
On Tuesday, 55-year-old Martha Thompson pled guilty to 37 counts of child endangerment and driving while intoxicated.
She's embarrassed. She's very sorry to the children. She never, ever would intentionally put any of those children, especially her own, in any type of risk.
Very sad story. Thompson will spend 12 weekends in jail and get 6 months of electronic home confinement, 5 years probation, and she'll have to undergo mandatory alcohol counseling. Harry?
All right, Jeff, thanks very much. Joining us now for an...
Okay, so what did her lawyer say about her? She would never do it intentionally. She never put those kids in harm. She would never do that, had no ill intention. But addiction is pretty powerful. We'll talk about addiction a little bit later here, but anybody that uses before work, they all think they're under control, right? I can take the medication or I can take a little alcohol, but I'm in control because I know what I'm doing and I've been doing it for a while, and they think they're in control, but there's so many things that happens to your brain and your body when you're under the influence of drugs or alcohol. That's why they passed that 1991 Transportation Act. It's because, when you are inhibited by the drugs or alcohol, you do make some errors and you have slower reactions and processing. So who's affected by this? The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. And you'll see this handbook here. You can get this handbook on a PDF online, and I think I have a slide for that. And before I go on, I do want to give you that password. I did look it up, and it is for your EAP website. It is Canton, TWP-WLS. And it's not case sensitive, so if your cap lock is on, it doesn't matter. Just Canton, TWP-WLS. And also, you do get the 6 counseling sessions. Okay, employees who perform safety-sensitive functions designated by the DOT or the Federal Transit or company policy. So it's whoever has the most stringent guidelines. So if the DOT mandates, where's your guidelines here? Trump your policy, the DOT takes precedent. If your company policy is more stringent than the DOT mandates, then your company policy trumps the DOT guidelines. So it's whichever has the most stringent rules, and it takes precedent. Now, the DOT Code of Conduct. All safety-sensitive employees are required to adhere to the following code of conduct. And they're prohibited from performing these duties while using alcohol. And I would think that one would be obvious. But obviously, it wasn't obvious for that school bus driver there. While having an alcohol concentration of 0.02 or greater, and I'll explain the blood alcohol content here, and Canton's policies on the blood alcohol content in a minute. Within 4 hours of consuming any quantity of alcohol. And this one's important. Let's say you're on call or it's your day off and your workplace calls you up, hey, can you come in, can you fill this shift? If you had any alcohol within 4 hours of coming to work, you better tell that supervisor that, no, I can't come in today. For whatever reason, you can make up a reason, and then in one of my trainings, somebody says, well, can't you just tell them you just had a drink? I said, well, that'll work too. If you want to disclose that, that's fine. But if you had any alcohol within 4 hours of that call-in, don't go to work. Now, Canton Township has a 0 tolerance. So any alcohol or drug testing positive to any degree whatsoever, it has reasonable, with any reasonable suspicion or random, that you will be terminated immediately. 0 tolerance policy at Canton Township. Now, somebody in one of my trainings, wanted to know is that too rigid kind of thing? How many companies actually have 0 tolerance? And a lot of the companies that we contract with, the great majority has 0 tolerance. Now, there's some companies that may have a union, that may have some challenges, not challenges, but some different regulations and a return to pathway employee to come back to work. But Canton has 0 tolerance. So some of this DOT regulations that I'm going through, they don't relate to Canton because any test positive is termination, but I have to include this anyways because if you do test positive and you get terminated, if you want to get another job driving, then you will have to go through the SAP process. So you do have to know these regulations in the process. And I don't like scare tactics or anything like that in prevention. I am a CPS, a certified prevention specialist, and scare tactics aren't the best prevention for children, like they put the crash car in front of the high school. That's not the best prevention technique. It could help some, but it could just not be effective for the others. But this could have happened to that school bus driver, and we don't realize how much this affects us. So their employer's responsibility is to have strong alcohol testing programs, which you do, must remove any employee, and what they mean, and here, what Canton means, remove means if you do violate that, remove you from employment, and must not return employees to safety-sensitive duties until, and I'll talk about the return to pathway for employment, but return to pathway to another employer for Canton because they do have zero tolerance. So where employers must ensure that no one is hired before a pre-employment testing, educate and train employees on the effects and consequences of drug or alcohol use, and that's what I'm here today. I'm going to talk about the effects, talk about addiction, talk about each of the drugs and how it affects us. And ensure that employees are placed into a random drug and alcohol testing pool and have an equal chance of being tested each time the selection is made. And every time I do a training like this, I always ask, has anybody ever been picked for each draw? And there's always somebody that's been picked 3 times in a row, 4 times in a row, 2 times in a row. Because once you're picked for that draw, your name goes right back into the hat and you have a 100% chance of being picked for the next draw. Now, sometimes companies draw quarterly, so every quarter. Now, we contract with a lot of municipalities and school districts, and they draw monthly. So let's go through some time frames for safety-sensitive functions. Your time at work are required for work readiness. Time inspecting, servicing, conditioning any DOT vehicle. Time spent at the driving controls, and I'd like that one. I always say that one should be obvious. Time in upon the DOT motor vehicle, except time in the sleeping berth, but we don't have the big rigs that we have the sleeping berth in the back. Time loading, unloading, supervising, assisting in loading or waiting for your vehicle to be loaded. Time repairing, obtaining assistance, or remaining in attendance upon a disabled vehicle. So your vehicle breaks down, you're waiting for a ride, it's lunchtime, there's a local pub there, you have lunch. You can have lunch and wait for a ride, but no alcoholic beverages or drug intake of any sort. So employees must read your organizational policies, and in your packet that you picked up in the beginning here, we have the Canton Township policies, you have the DOT policies, so there's a lot of documents here to know your rights, know your company policy. Know the law and how it may affect you, and that is the link that'll take you to the handbook if you want to download the handbook and read some of the DOT guidelines here. And then understand the effects and consequences of substance use, misuse, and we'll go through that today. Testing requirements. Pre-employment, of course, there's going to be a drug screen, pre-duty. Whatever's mandated in the company policy. Remember, the DOT policy says one, but if your company policy says every time you sneeze, you get a drug test, well, then that's the company policy. Of course, I'm exaggerating with the sneeze thing, but whatever's in your company policy, if it's in the policy and they want a test, well, then that requires a test. And the post-accident DOT compliance. Now, again, I'll talk about the DOT, but if any fender bender bumper says you need a drug screen in your company policy, well, then that's that. But the DOT mandate says that if there is a fatality, then there's going to be a drug screen. Or the driver has been issued a citation and there has been an injury, so both of those things need to take place, and then there's a mandatory drug screen. Or in that accident, one of the vehicles is towed away. If one of the vehicles are towed away, then that's a mandated drug screen. Now, after the accident, you're prohibited from using drugs for 8 hours following the accident or crash, or until they've gone a post-accident alcohol and drug test. Now, that one's really important. Our senior clinician, Scott, told me the story. You know, somebody got in an accident, and the company didn't know the rules, the DOT mandates, and didn't know what to do. So they got in the accident. The person drove home, end of the day, has dinner with the family, drinks a few alcoholic beverages, and then the employer calls back up and says, oh, hey, you have to come back in for a post-accident drug screen. And that person tested positive for alcohol. That person doesn't have an alcohol problem. That person doesn't drink while on the job, although he didn't realize he shouldn't have alcohol within 8 hours, or they should have had a test immediately or within that 8 hours of that accident. So he tested positive and straight to the SAP process. Also, alcohol test ideally 2 hours following the accident, no later than 8 hours following that accident. And then the drug test as soon as possible, no later than 32 hours after that accident. Now, the required testing, there's 2 required tests besides that accident test. The reasonable suspicion, that is when a trained supervisor observes behavior characteristics that seem like it's under the influence of drugs or alcohol. And that's the second hour the supervisors stay in this room. We'll do the second hour of this training for reasonable suspicion. And then the random. Random is conducted on an unannounced random basis from a pool of the employees. The number of tests equal a certain percentage of all safety-sensitive employees. So there at the bottom, you see that every draw they take for alcohol, they take 10% of the workforce, safety-sensitive workforce. And the drugs, they take 50% of the workforce, every draw. Now, the alcohol breath tests, the 0.02 or greater, employer will be notified immediately, so it's not a DOT violation. They just notify the employer that the person tested at 0.02. So in the Canton guidelines, the Canton policies, 0.02, immediate dismissal. 0.02 to 0.039, employees must be removed for 8 hours until they can blow less than a 0.02. Although in Canton, of course, it is the end, termination. Now, 0.04 or greater, that is the magic number. That is where the employee will be removed from safety-sensitive duty and sent straight to a SAP assessment. Your employer will give you a list of SAP counselors. You pick from that list. Of course, companies that contract with us, they will pick CARE because the first assessment is covered under your EAP, and the return to work assessment is covered under your EAP. And that assessment costs probably like $350 for the drug assessment. So obviously anybody picking a SAP counselor would, save $900 for each of those assessments. Now, of course, when you're terminated here, you don't have to go into the SAP, but then you won't be able to get another job in the field of transportation or, CDL, anything that has to do with driving under the DOT. So now, when does medication become a concern? Obviously, I'm not going to read this whole thing, but if you are taking any medication prescribed by a doctor, you should notify your employer or the MRO. The MRO is usually the person at the testing site who makes that determination. So you're taking medication, you could inform your employer, say, hey, I have this medication prescribed by my doctor, and then the MRO is the medical review officer. The medical review officer will say, okay, that's fine, take it with the script that the doctor prescribed, that's okay. A lot of people maybe don't want to disclose their medication to their employer or to the MRO, and they don't. But if they do test positive for one of the controlled substances, which we'll get into in a minute, then it is a positive, but then you as the employee have 5 days to get your primary care physician or the prescribing physician to contact the MRO, and the MRO and your doctor could talk, and the doctor can say, you're under this medication, but it's the MRO's final decision. Your doctor can say it's okay, but the MRO can say that goes against DOT regulations, and then now that's a positive test where they'll call your employer. And all this is done before they call your employer. You get 5 days for your physician and the MRO to clear anything up. Now, drug testing requirements, your supervisor or DER, whatever your designated employee representative is, will notify you whether you got picked for the random, or the designated employee representative will notice any reasonable suspicion characteristics, and then they will notify you to go to take a drug screen. And then you need to report immediately when you're told about the drug screen, whether it's random or reasonable suspicion. You need to go immediately within a reasonable amount of time that the employer asks. So the collection process, they'll ask for photo identification, remove any bulky clothing. I mean, winter's time is coming, so people have all kinds of extra clothes on, so they might have you remove any of that. Show contents of their pockets if they ask you to empty the pockets. Wash your hands. This is to get rid of any contaminants for that sample. Provide 45 milliliters of urine. If you have a shy bladder, you're going to be hanging out there for a while. They'll give you some liquids. They'll give you up to 40 ounces of liquids over a period of 3 hours until you can provide that sample. The collector will check the sample for temperature, appearance, or any other signs of adulteration. The sample will be split into 2 containers right in front of you, sealed, taped, initialed. The employee will initial the release of chain of custody of that sample, and everybody who touches it from then on has to sign that. Now, that sample will, after it's tested, will be considered a positive test result if there's dilution. So if there's excessive fluids, and I believe that's probably why they only give you like 40 ounces in that time period. Excessive fluids, because if somebody knows they has ingested some drugs or alcohol, they'll just start drinking and diluting the alcohol or something and washing that out, or they stop and get the teas or the cleanses or something. So if there's any dilution of that sample, that is considered a positive test. Any substitutions, so creatinine in specific gravity to see if it's human urine, because there's all kinds of ways that people try to use any type of urine they can. If you own a farm or whatever, you can collect urine from. And creatinine is secreted from my muscles. It's for metabolism, so they know if it's human urine or not. Any adulterations would be reported as a positive test and removed immediately to the SAP process or termination for Canton Township. Also positive tests if the employee refuses to be tested, does not show up in a reasonable amount of time. So the employer gives that reasonable amount of time, get there by 3:15 or whatever it is, and you need to get there by 3:15. I remember the first time when I was shadowing here at Canton when you had the clinic do this portion. I remember the lady told the story that they told, to get there by 3:15, they were 15 minutes late. They show up at 3:30. And then she was like, what did that person do in that extra 15 minutes? Did they stop at the drugstore to get any teas or cleanses? Did they stop at their grandmother's house or their friend's house to find some clean urine? I mean, what did they do with that extra time? So when they give you a reasonable amount of time, you need to be there in that reasonable amount of time. If you leave before the test is complete, and it says except pre-employment, of course you won't get the job, but you won't get a DOT violation, you just don't get the job. Also, let's say it's taking too long, and you're like, I have to pick up my kids, I don't have time for this, and you leave, that's considered a positive test. If you refuse to cooperate with any part of the collection process, so you don't want to empty your pockets, you don't want to take off your jacket, whatever it is, if you refuse to comply with any of that process. Also, positive test results if the employee fails to permit an observed or monitored collection when an observed monitored collection is required. So an observed monitored collection would be required if they suspect that there was some adulteration going on, something was going on, and maybe they lost the B split, and they want you to come back in. If you fail to provide a sufficient amount of urine, breath, saliva, and it's been determined so you can't provide that sample, then your medical doctor needs to give a medical reason why you couldn't provide that sample, or whatever they're looking for. And if there's no medical reason why you couldn't provide that sample, that could be considered as a positive test. And if you fail or decline to take a second test that the employer or the collector has directed to be taken. So let's say they lost the B split. And you're like, well, that's your problem. You lost it. I gave you my sample. No, it's not. If they need a second test for whatever reason, then you need to come in to do the second test. So all of those activities are treated the same as a positive test. Employee removed, straight to the SAP process, but of course, Canton Township, it's termination. Now, for your protection, test results will be sent to the medical review officer. Employees will be given the opportunity to discuss the non-negative results with the MRO. So those non-negative results means it was positive, but now you get to talk to the MRO, right? You get to connect them to your physician, your prescribing physician if it's in the medication, and you get to talk about that. And if the physician can clear it up and the MRO says, all right, that's good, then it's a negative test. They tell the employer it's a negative test if it's cleared up in that talk. If it's not, the report's given to the employer and then removed from safety-sensitive duty, disciplinary action, need to comply with those recommendations. Now, if a test is positive, the employer is not responsible for holding your job, for covering the cost, for any type of cost of drug education or assessments. So if it's a positive test, then all of those responsibilities are on you. All of those costs are on you. The SAP process, I will go through the SAP process here just to educate you on what the SAP process is. If you do want to continue your career, with your CDL, that you will have to go through a SAP process. So you have to pass there's an assessment that happens, and the assessment is dozens and dozens of questions. The assessment lasts like an hour, and they ask you a bunch of questions, and they're trying to determine if that person has a substance use disorder. And the SAP counselor must recommend education and treatment. So after that assessment, however serious they think it is, the addiction, they're going to give you a recommended amount of time for education and drug screens, and things like that. The SAP must include a second evaluation to determine if the employee has successfully completed all those recommendations. So after all those recommendations, then you have to get another assessment. And they say, a drink is a drink is a drink. So that 1 ounce is in every standard drink. So there's 1 ounce of alcohol in a 12-ounce beer, on an average of that 5% alcohol. So some of the IPAs and some of those imported beers, some of them are 6, 7, 8% alcohol. So it could vary a little bit on that that one standard drink. There could be more than one standard drink. There could be 2 ounces of alcohol in one 12-ounce beer. But we're going to just talk about standard drinks, domestic beer. So 1 ounce of alcohol in 12 ounces of beer. And then here you can see the malt liquor has 7% alcohol. So it's going to raise your blood alcohol a little faster and take a little longer for it to detoxify. 5 ounces of wine still has 1 ounce of alcohol, one standard drink. And then distilled spirits, 1.5 ounces of any distilled spirits. You see at 80 proof there. So if you have 100 proof, of course, it's going to go higher faster. But a drink is a drink is a drink is a drink. So it doesn't matter what it is. One standard drink is 1 ounce of alcohol, which takes 1 hour for that to process out. Now, anybody know who W.C. Fields is? W.C. Fields, I'm a little older than some of you, I see. Smoked a cigar, always drinking whiskey, and he used to say, 2 fingers, please, 2 fingers. And then they pour the shot of whiskey, and then he grows his 2 fingers. 2 fingers, please, 2 fingers. And now he's got like 4 standard drinks in that one glass. Or if you order a Long Island iced tea, how much alcohol does a Long Island iced tea have in it? You know, there's like probably 4 different types of alcohol. I had a bartender in one of my groups, and I thought there was a shot of each type of alcohol in there, but he goes, no, there's some regulations that you can only serve a certain amount of alcohol in one standard drink. But let's say out of the 4 or 5 different types of alcohol in a Long Island iced tea, let's say there's 3 shots, 3 standard drinks in that one Long Island iced tea, and then a little bit of Coca-Cola in there. So how many hours would that one Long Island iced tea take to detoxify out of your body? 3 hours, right? 1 drink, I only had 1 drink, officer. Well, there's 3 standard drinks in that 1 drink. Or you go and you see those big Boomba wine glasses, and you fill that up 3/4. Well, that's way more than 5 ounces. There might be 10 ounces in there, which would be 2 standard drinks of wine. So we really need to know that. And I brought my red Solo cup here. In the red Solo cup, when it was first kind of designed, they have these ridges. And these ridges is to measure a standard drink size, and they used it for mixing drinks and measuring drinks. But the bottom rim here, this first one, is 1.5 ounces. So that's 1 standard drink of distilled spirits. Then the middle line here, this is 5 ounces. So if you're drinking wine, you're going to fill it up here, and that's 1 standard drink, so you can kind of keep track of how many standard drinks. So if you fill the wine all the way up here, well, that's 2 standard drinks or a little more. The top line there was 12 ounces for 1 standard 12-ounce beer, so you can, track on how many standard drinks you're having. Some people think that if they are intoxicated, that we can sober them up, right? Cold shower, smack in the face, coffee, eat, and that's going to sober me up. But nothing sobers you up. Nothing drops your blood alcohol content except time. Now, if you're moving and your metabolism is moving, you can probably process that out and sweat out more alcohol and things like that. But it's only time that's going to lower your blood alcohol level, not coffee, not a cold shower, not a smack in the face. So our livers can process that out, so we really have to be conscious of that. And then body size, eating habits, individual metabolism could be different in individuals. But you see on the bottom there, 1 drink could raise your blood alcohol content to 0.02, which would be in violation of the Canton Township, not the DOT. But a couple drinks might go to 0.04, and then that is the DOT magic number of getting into the SAP process. Cough medicine, mouthwash, sleeping aids, some of them, I should say, contain alcohol. So this is your careers with your CDL, so you really need to be conscious of what you're putting into your body. So if you're on cold medication and you rinse with Listerine in the morning and you go to work, you get picked for a random drug screen, it's possible you can be tested. You can have a 0.02 blood alcohol concentration. So just be conscious of that. Just like the poppy seeds, right? If somebody eats those poppy seeds on their muffin and they eat a bunch of them, 4 or 5 muffins, and they can be tested positive for opioids. So just be aware of what you're putting into your body. In the addiction cycle, use leads to abuse. Use is just a regular user. You just use and socialize, and you use alcohol or drugs. Abuse comes in when there's negative consequences and you continue using. Like for youth, if they're using and they get suspended, they get caught, they get a minor in possession ticket at a party, they have any type of lose their car, their parents take all their stuff away, and they continue using, that's now they're at that stage of abuse. And for adults, if they're using and they have negative consequences, maybe family dysfunction or divorce, maybe a DUI, maybe a loss of employment. So if there's any negative consequences from that adult using and they continue using, well, then you're at the abuse level. There's 4 levels of addiction. The first is experimenting. You can't get addicted to something if you don't experiment with it. If you never used it, you'll never get addicted to it. The second stage is use. You become a user. The third stage is abuse, which is on the screen. And the fourth stage is dependency, where now your body is dependent on that drug. The tissues in your body, the organs in your body need that drug to survive. With the opioid epidemic, you see people that without the drug of choice, they're in pain. They're throwing up, they're having convulsions, they're diarrhea, they're in pain, they're having serious withdrawals. So they have to use to be unsick, and that's what they call it. They use to be unsick. So if I'm in withdrawal, I have to use so I can get up and go to work. So that's how serious that addiction is. And then, of course, the tolerance goes up, and you're using more and more to get that same effect. So under the alcohol, these are chronic and long-term effects of the alcohol. Nutritional deficiencies, impaired short-term memory, a disease. It is a carcinogen, so it's associated with several forms of cancer. So it has more physiological problems than we think. They say, alcohol is good, like red wine once a day. It is a carcinogen. So it does create these problems and these effects in our body. I want to do one thing before I move on from alcohol to kind of let you guys know what it's like to have our brains kind of distorted by alcohol. Our brains have 4 quadrants. We have the prefrontal lobe here, our cortex, that's our executive center, our thinking center. We have a parietal lobe that's in the top middle. Parietal lobe kind of takes care of like large motor movements and stuff like that. We have our temporal lobe, which is right behind our temple here. That has to do with taste and smell and stuff. And then we have the back of our brain, which is the occipital lobe, that has to do with our vision. It takes in all the light and all the data in our vision. Those 4 quadrants have to communicate like a well-oiled machine. And they have to work together and communicate. Otherwise, with one of them shutting down or one of them affected by drugs or alcohol, then they're not going to communicate effectively. So I want everybody to stand up, and I want to do a little activity with you to see what it's like when our brain is affected, when all 4 quadrants aren't communicating. So right now, and this is kind of hard with the small area you have there, but without touching anything, you might have to turn sideways if you have to, but I want you to lift your leg behind you and stand on one foot. Could everybody stand on one foot? Maybe a little shaky, but once you get the balance down, you might shake a little bit, but then it's like, okay, I got this. How long do you think you can stand on one foot? Some of us, maybe a minute or two. Some of us, like, I'll be here all day. What's the big deal? All right, put your feet down and relax. So now, I'm going to shut off one of your 4 quadrants of your brain. It's going to be painless, don't worry. I'm going to have you close your eyes, which is going to shut off the occipital lobe. Once your occipital lobe is shut off, it's not getting all those messages. So now, when I ask you to, I want you to, stand on one leg. Don't do it yet. Stand on one leg, and then I'm going to time you and say, okay, close your eyes. So now, if you touch the chair in front of you or anything, sit down, you're out. You can wiggle, but you can't hop. So if you hop, sit down, you're out. If you open your eyes, obviously, sit down, you're out. Okay? All right, here we go. Everybody stand on one leg. Balance yourself. Good. Close your eyes now. Still got lots of people standing. It's got about 8 people standing. Keep going. 6 people standing. 4 people. Ooh, we got some yoga masters out there, statues. 3 people standing. That's 2 people. 1 person. Keep going, 1 person. I want to see how long this is. We're going on 45 seconds. He's got his arms crossed, relaxed. I think he fell asleep. He opened his eyes. Okay, that was 55 seconds. That's amazing. All right, so, woo-woo. This is brain fitness. Kind of tells you how integrated your brain is. You can practice and kind of integrate your brain a little and do it longer, but that's amazing. Younger people, their brains are a little bit more fit. They can probably stand a minute and a half if they practice, but as we get older, our brains aren't that integrated. But once you add a chemical or alcohol to your brain, you're not firing on all 4 cylinders, and right away you close your eyes, and then most of you just toppled right over. All right, so now let's talk about the 5 prohibited drugs from the DOT. Marijuana, opiates, and you see on opiates, in 2018, they added the semi-synthetic opioids. Opiates means the direct derivative of that poppy plant. So that is the heroin, opium, morphine coating, direct derivative from that plant. But the semi-synthetics are the man-made ones, and you see a lot of familiar things there: oxycodone, Oxycontin, Percocet, Vicodin, and some of us may be on some of these opioids for pain management. We need pain management in our lives. Well, so if you are on some prescribed medication, like I said, tell your MRO, your medical review officer, and if you don't, you better be taking that to the script from your doctor. But if you do test positive, then you got to get your doctor and the MRO together to clear that up and make sure the MRO approves. That's the final thing. We need pain management. So I'm sure some people in the audience right now have some pain management going on and aches and pains. But we can't take our partner's pain medication, because if we do test positive, we don't have a prescribing physician to clear it up with the MRO. So it needs to be yours, and it needs to be taken from that script. Cocaine, amphetamines, and phencyclidine. And we'll go through each one of those to give you a little education on each of those. So marijuana, marijuana is in a class of its own. There's depressants that slow the central nervous system down. There are stimulants that speed up the central nervous system. Then there's hallucinogens that kind of detach you from reality and have some, hallucinations and illusions and stuff. But marijuana could be in any of those categories. It's in a class of its own because it could be a depressant or it could be a stimulant. Sativa is a stimulant. It's more of a mind-stimulating effect. Alertness, mind-stimulating. And indica is more of the depressant. It's more of a body relaxant. So I used to get them all mixed up, sativa and indica. To separate them, somebody told me, think of indica meaning in the couch. So you smoke indica strain of marijuana and you just melt in the couch. It's like relaxing. So it could be depressant, could be stimulant, also could be a hallucinogen. A hallucinogen with the high levels of THC in our marijuana these days. They can grow marijuana all the way to, the average is like 15%. When I was growing up back in the 60s and 70s, 4% THC was like good marijuana. Now here it is in the 21st century, they are growing it with like 35% marijuana just in that grown strain. And then they have marijuana extracts that they put it through a process and they strip all the THC off of that. And now you have like pure THC, 90%, even 98, 99% THC. Those oils and stuff. Like shatter and wax and butter. There's all kinds of names for that. And then they put those in edibles and stuff. And they have the clear vaping pens. So if you see somebody vaping, you don't know if that's nicotine or you don't know if that's THC. And some of those have really high concentrations. So it could be a hallucinogen with those high THC. THC is the psycho mind effect from that drug. You have the CBD, which is like the medical portion. Now when you hear medical marijuana, CBD is like an anti-inflammatory. It's used most for the medical purposes of, seizures or, let me get my thoughts together here. THC, psychoactive component, which makes your mind, feel that high. CBD is more for inflammation and pain. Now, some of the CBD, and I think you had something on CBD in I remember last time we had a CBD portion. But I'll talk about the CBD. So now CBD, you can buy it off the internet. You can probably buy it on every corner of every strip mall. You see CBD oils right in the window. And they say 100% CBD. And now CBD does have some medical benefits. Marijuana has some medical uses. And when they kind of regulate that and get that all set, maybe they can take marijuana off of the Schedule I drug, off the federal scheduling of that. But it's still on the federal scheduling one. So when somebody has a medical marijuana card, they're not using it properly because they go to the dispensary and they want the best marijuana they have, right? So they're looking at the 15, 20, 25, 30% marijuana, which is actually inhibiting the medical portion of that. So the CBD that is for inflammation and pain and stuff, 3% THC could enhance the CBD for medical reasons, for pain and inflammation and things like that. But once you go into, the 10s and 15s and 20s of the THC, well, now it's not doing what it's supposed to do. It's actually affecting it and can exacerbate it. Small levels of THC kind of helps the CBD, or straight CBD would be great too. But now, the reason I'm telling you this, people buy CBD thinking they're safe, as in no THC because I'm on a drug-free workplace. So CBD, but it's not regulated by the federal government. So they can say 100% CBD, and there could be some THC in there. So whether you're using the tinctured oils in the mouth, whether you're using swabs on your aches and pains, you don't know if there's THC in there or not, even if it says 100% THC. One of the school districts we contract with, ladies in my training, she says her friend got fired as a bus driver. She does not smoke marijuana, she's telling me. She bought this 100% CBD off the internet. Well, I said, well, I told her this, that's not regulated, they can lie. Or maybe they're not lying, they just don't know. So she goes, no, it said 100% CBD. I said, well, then your friend smokes marijuana. And she says, no, she doesn't smoke marijuana. I said, well, the internet's lying to you. You bought CBD with THC in it. She goes, no, it said 100% THC. I'm sorry, CBD. I said, well, then your friend smokes marijuana. And we went back and forth like 5 times in a circle. Somebody's lying. And of course, her friend didn't smoke marijuana. It's just that there's THC in that CBD oil or ointment. So be careful. If you're using CBD and it has small levels of THC in there, it can accumulate in your body. THC is stored in your fat cells in your body, so the more you use it, it's stored in the fat cells. And guess what your brain is made of? Fat and protein and water. So CBD is stored. They say some people who smoke marijuana that are now off of the psychoactive high of marijuana, the THC that's stored in their body is still affecting their memory, still affecting their movements, depending on how much THC is stored in your body. So some of the signs and symptoms of marijuana, in the next hour with a reasonable suspicion, we'll get a little deeper into this, but you guys can just take a quick little look at some of the effects of marijuana here. That rapid, loud talking, excessive laughter, forgetfulness, the things that we kind of associate with marijuana. And this is what I should have saved all my stories for, the medical marijuana here. We want to make it perfectly clear that medical marijuana, CBD, whatever it is, I want to make it perfectly clear, does not authorize, the federal government does not authorize any of that. So if you test positive for THC, it doesn't matter if you have a card, it doesn't matter anything. It doesn't matter if you don't use marijuana and you say it's actually CBD, you test positive for marijuana, it is a violation of the DOT code. Now we get to the opiates and opioids, I had to add there. Opiates, they are painkillers. They just reduce the pain. It changes, shuts off some of the pain sensors in your brain, and it's used for pain management. That's all they're used for is pain management. Opioids and opiates, pain management. And it gives you that euphoria. It does kind of, give you that euphoria, that relaxed state, and it reduces the pain. Some of the signs and symptoms you see, the pinpoint pupils, and we'll get more deeper into this, but as drivers, you can see some of the signs and symptoms there. And that last one, if you see any workmates in a coma or death, don't let them drive. That's the only joke I have in this dry presentation, so you have to laugh at it. So, opiates, and this is where, you take opiates. One of the peer recovery coaches at our agency telling me the story. She got injured, and she got a prescription, and this is several years ago. I should say a decade or more, actually. And it said take 4 opioids a day. And she thought it was like medication. She thought it was like, you have to take all of the pills when you're on, you have to take the whole series of, antibiotic, right? You have to take the whole series. So she thought the opioids prescribed by the doctor, and it was like 80 of them in there, 90 of them, take 4 a day. So she took 4 days. He didn't say take 4 day when needed. If you have pain, take this pill. So she took 4 day, 4 day, 4 day, 4 day. And then that euphoria effect, that feel-good effect, was really feeling good. And you get a little tolerance. So now I want that feeling again. So now you got maybe take 6 a day. Now you take maybe 10 a day. Now you take 12 a day, and the tolerance keeps going up. So now you're not taking them for pain, you're taking them because now the addictive state of that addiction where tolerance goes up, and now you need the same, or you have to increase it to get that same feeling. Now, cocaine is a stimulant. It stimulates the central nervous system, and it wakes you up and races your heart. And some of the signs and symptoms of a stimulant. And you see, most all of the drugs on this prohibited list dilates the pupils. Opioids are the only ones that pinpoint the pupils. But you see some of these signs and symptoms here. You can take a look at it. Supervisors will go a little deeper into this. So cocaine, really highly addictive, just like opioids, really highly addictive, and alcohol. And then we get into amphetamines. Amphetamines are also stimulants. And amphetamines are stimulants that like people use for ADHD and stuff, like Concerta, Ritalin and stuff. So it is a stimulant. They're wondering why they're giving somebody with ADHD a stimulant. It's like they're already bouncing off the walls. What do they need the stimulant for? So doctors weren't agreeing. But the stimulant wakes up the parts of the brain that tells the other parts to slow down. So these parts of your brain are overreacting, but the part that is sleeping or dormant, the stimulant wakes that up. So in the prefrontal cortex here, it wakes it up to control all the overreacting parts. So that was really interesting. So amphetamines here, this lady's picture here, this is, of course, isn't prescribed by a doctor, amphetamines like the Ritalin and stuff. This is methamphetamines. And you can see within 7 years the effects of this woman here. These are the pictures of her arrest records off the internet. So amphetamines are the same thing. It is that stimulant, and you can see some of the signs and symptoms here on the screen. And also in the amphetamines category, which the DOT does test for, is the ecstasy, the MDMA ecstasy. This is an amphetamine-based hallucinogen. Probably back in the 2000s, in the 90s and 2000s, where it was kind of hype in the rave clubs, and a lot of the youth were using ecstasy. They're taken orally. It affects the body's ability to regulate temperature. All your senses are kind of exacerbated. So light is like amazing, touch is amazing. I mean, everything is just exaggerated. The gentleman here with the pacifier. So if you have any youth and you see any paraphernalia, the pacifier or chew necklaces they have is for people that use ecstasy because you'll see some of the signs and symptoms here. That bottom one, the muscle tension, dry mouth, you kind of clench and grind your teeth. So at parties or when you're using ecstasy, that you need a pacifier or a chew toy to clench on so you don't crack your teeth. And then the distorted senses, poor perception. And the last one is the PCP. This is the phencyclidine. This here turns off your pain receptors. This one is like the acid back in the 70s and stuff. It's a hallucinogen, turns off your pain receptors, hallucinations. This is what you see like on the cops show on television where it takes 10 officers to take down this person. They tase them, it doesn't feel a thing. You know, no, you can beat them with a bat, they don't feel it. Everything is like turned off. And you can see some of the signs and symptoms here. Now, the phencyclidine and the hallucinogens, it's only 1% of all test positives for the DOT, 1%, so it's not very prevalent. Although I believe it's making a comeback because in the psychology field for PTSD and depression, they've been using hallucinogens as a tool to help people with PTSD and depression. The magic mushrooms, I forget the medical term for it, psilocybin, the magic mushroom. Say again? Psilocybin, thank you for that. Psilocybin. So it may be growing in popularity with the hallucinogens. So remember, it's all about safety. Do your part, report your concerns, get help if you need it. I just want to tell you that if you do self-disclose, if any of this kind of gave you any realization, maybe you have some drug or alcohol use that you may need assistance with, that you can disclose that to your employer, and then you can get some help, some intervention, and that is not a DOT violation. If you disclose that you need some treatment, then you get the treatment and it's not a DOT violation. And you can see your employee assistance program and get that help and intervention. If you see a workmate that may be under the influence of drugs or alcohol, you can tell them, hey Sam, you better not get in that truck, you better go home because I see what's going on here. So everybody be aware of their own behavior as well as, your colleagues' behavior. Again, be aware of your EAP. It's a great employee resource, totally confidential, totally free. And I thank you for your time. And you're free to go.